My computer and my phone might make noises. Oh, we're live. We're live on YouTube.
That's
Uh,
amazing. That's so
so,
weird. I've
so
never.
yeah, it's cool. I like it.
Yeah.
Uh, I should say I'm Jen Toksvig, and I'm coming at people from the larder. And I'm joined by Sophie Trott.
Yes.
Say
I'm
hello.
here. Hello. Hello. Yes, you're joined by me, and I'm a performer that is working with you.
On Tiny Shows.
Funny shows. Yes.
But you've worked with me before on crazy things. You've done my crazy work processes before, haven't you?
I've done your crazy work processes before.
And you're still alive, so
And
that's,
still I survived, and I think that those crazy work processes are very good processes, and I've really enjoyed doing um, the thing that you do with writers.
what, slightly confuse them.
Yeah, you just like, no, I think it's really, I think the last time I did a thing with you was reading some plays for some writers.
Yes, yes, we do development with cold readings, yes.
Yeah. And so we were reading, and then we talked about them, and then you talked to them about bits that we wanted more of, and bits that, you know, we needed this bit of the journey fleshed out and things like
Yes.
that. And actually it felt like a really useful process. It was really good.
That's great. Well, you also write, so it's good for me
Well,
to
that's
know.
what I was thinking about it as a writer and thinking, oh, I wish we'd done this. But it was too late because we'd already.
It's never too late to do that.
Yeah.
So you, all you know about Tiny Shows is mostly that you're wonderful and my friend. So if I say, "Are you free this weekend to come and do a thing?" you typically try and go, "Yeah," without knowing much about it. Is that fair?
I know that it'll be with you and some other people, and that there's going to be lots of writers and maybe lots of performers. And I don't know if any of the writers are performing or if the writers are just writing.
That's a really good question, and the first of many, I hope, really useful questions for us to ask. I'm just going to get a notepad.
Okay.
So that I can make some notes about useful things to give people information on if they need it.
Yeah.
So, yes, there are, in theory, well, there are definitely 30 writers. In fact, there's slightly more than 30 now. Writers and composers, and some of them are just words people, and some of them are just music people, and some of them are both.
Hmm.
And then there are hopefully about 30 performers joining us, of all kinds. Some who've worked with me before, some who haven't, some who have just graduated from drama school, some who've been in the business a long time. So they have all kinds of different experience of making proscenium arch theatre and immersive theatre. Some of them are experienced improvisers, and some of them not so much.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about that because I hope that we will all make discoveries from each other. One of the plans for Tiny Shows is that we will all make discoveries about writing and creating and storytelling, about performing and improvising, about working together. So that's one of the plans.
Yeah.
And the other plan is that we will work in a risky way. So I've done some provocations online with various people to talk about what it is to make immersive work, what it is to do. We're doing one on working processes, so what it is to step away from a keyboard if you're a composer and compose in the air, what it is to, you know, write on the back of actors in the way that I do.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that process a little bit, because a lot of the work that you and I have made is me as a writer coming in and going, I think there's these characters and I think these things happen, but let's find out what that is. Do you want to just say a bit about how that's been for you?
Yeah. So when we did Hitler's Canary, it involved lots of talking about what the story was, what we wanted to show, and who these people were, and creating their world, and then just sort of putting them in that world and seeing what happened to them, kind of knowing that certain specific things were going to happen, but also not knowing what was going to happen.
Not knowing what was going to happen. Yeah.
So having kind of plot points that you were working towards, but not in a very necessarily driven way, like we've got to get to this in this amount of time. It was like, oh, we're at the party after the show, here we go, let's see.
Yeah, let's just do it and see what happens.
Yeah.
So we did some really long form improv, which I really enjoyed as part of that process, where I think the first time we did a weekend at Watford, we did improvise a party, and we did do the party, didn't we? And we just improvised for like an hour. I think
But that's the thing, is that I think when you're doing it, I'm not really thinking about how long we were doing it for.
No.
So I don't remember how long it was.
I think I looked at my watch at one point and went, oh, we've been doing this quite a while, and I've not actually said anything about, you know, why we're doing it. I just let it roll.
Yeah.
So here's an interesting thing about two thoughts I have about that. The first one is that on the day in tiny shows, I've split the days into writing sessions.
Right.
So we're making.
Sorry, can I just ask you?
Yeah.
Before the tiny shows start, has anybody written anything?
No.
Right. Okay.
So it all happens on the day because there's one big story that we're using that we are going to split up into sections that will inspire the tiny musicals, and then at the end of the weekend we're going to fill the space that we've been working in, which is at 3 floors of a building, with these tiny little shows. And the idea is that the audience are then exposed to the big story in a number of small segments.
Yeah.
So and I haven't told anyone what the big story is, and I won't be telling anyone until we get there on the Saturday morning.
Okay.
To make sure that there's no. So I've been saying to people, think about these ways of working, think about what you might do with song, think about how we tell short stories, to encourage people to have plans coming in, you know, I want to try this, or I want to try working that way, but not, I want to make this story. That's not going to happen until the day.
Okay.
Because this is about taking risks and not really about the story, actually. So we're working in open space.
Yeah.
So in the morning, people will say, oh, I want to do this story or that story, or, you know, I'm calling this session to explore this kind of moment. And then other people who are interested in that will come and talk to them and join with them and collaborate with them. And that includes performers and writers.
Yeah.
And the performers are welcome to, you know, write bits, devise things, and the writers are welcome to perform bits. There's no rules.
Right, brilliant. So you might well have sort of 3 writers on one session and no performers, or any combination.
Yes.
Yeah.
And although we are saying that there's these writers who are predominantly in the room to do writing, and that these people are predominantly in the room to do performing, there's no, you're not allowed to bring stuff, you know. We're also asking everybody to sign a piece of paper at the beginning that says anything you contribute, you could take away and develop yourself. Yeah. There's nobody's going to take it away. So whatever you give, you take away, you own, you can do whatever you like with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the plan. So instead of open space being normally hour-and-a-half sessions, we're starting with hour-long sessions, and they get shorter through the weekend. Right. Not because I want us to work faster, but because I think A, we'll get better at it, at hitting the ground running. And B, I think we'll, in the same way that I think we did with Hitler's Canary, we started out with big stuff and then we got more efficient at what we were looking for.
Yeah.
But also I think I would like us to go a bit deeper into things. So if you've only got a 5-minute session, I think 10 minutes is the shortest we get to, actually. If you've only got a 10-minute session, you know, if you spent 10 minutes talking about the word "and," you could probably get quite a lot out of 10 minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
So that for me is the intention. So what questions does that give you about that stuff?
Is there a showing?
Yes, there is.
Is there more than one showing?
Yes, there is. So on Sunday afternoon, we start doing what I'm calling conglomeration, which is we have some time when we all get together and look at all the tiny moments that we've created and decide collectively how we're going to scatter them through the house so that everybody can see the big story. So we're going to work together on that, fill in the holes, try and make it be a big thing, one thing. And then we have a sort of a dress rehearsal, and then we have one informal performance to our friends and family that we've invited, and then we have one performance to some industry people that I have invited, and the 2 women who are organising it with me, Linda and Buffy, we've made a list and invited some people in the industry that we know will be friendly towards it, that we know will be interested in coming to see this kind of work, and that we know will understand what it is that we're doing.
Yeah.
But also some people that we hope might make good connections for everybody, and you know, those people. So yeah, you get to do it 3 times. But of course, the tiny shows are 6 minutes or less, down to 6 seconds long.
Yeah.
So one of the questions is, one of the writers asked, do we just keep doing the shows over and over?
Right.
And that is a good question.
And I suppose it depends, because you've got possibly 30 performers, possibly 60 performers, depending on whether the writers perform as well, and in a sort of infinite number of combinations. So you probably can't repeat, because people will be doing more than one show.
That's a really good point.
So, like, you know, you might be in show 1 and show 9 or something.
But they might not be linear in that way.
And it might not be linear, but so there'll be some kind of matrix thing. You have to work out who's doing what.
A matrix of the show.
Yeah.
That's nice. That's true. And also, because we're doing tiny shows in spaces that are not that tiny, I mean, they're fairly substantial rooms.
Yeah.
Some of them at least.
Yeah.
So some rooms will have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 shows going on simultaneously. And hopefully people will be able to create within those spaces and collaborate together to go, oh, I see, you're doing a thing in that corner of this room and that's quite loud at that point. So maybe we'll work with that and see how we can use that.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of stuff.
So
it might,
sorry, how
long? No, I was just going to say, it might be that a room has a feeling within it that gets responded to, you know, in that kind of devised way.
Yeah. And overall, how long is it? So friends and family come to something that's how long?
We've allowed an hour.
An hour. Yeah.
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 So
I imagine myself in this process.
Yeah.
I imagine myself thinking, I want to be in that session and that session all at the same time.
Okay. So how do we deal with that?
I don't know, but I can imagine, you know, it makes me think of a David Shrigley drawing where it's a drawing of a person about to be executed, and it says, I want to be the person being executed, and I want to be the person pressing the button, and I want to be the person watching. I can't remember something.
I can't be all of those people. It's interesting.
That's my thing, and that is part of the thing of open space and having that freedom to do what you want. Is actually, choice can be quite crippling sometimes.
Choice can be.
Change your mind. Well, you can. I mean, there's the law of 2 feet, obviously. There
is the law of 2 feet. So the law of 2 feet, for people who've not done open space before, means that when you find yourself in a place where you're not contributing or getting anything out of a situation, you use your 2 feet and go somewhere where you can be useful.
Yeah.
And I love the law of 2 feet. So that means that if someone's in your session in open space and they're not feeling like it's their kind of place or their kind of conversation, they can just go, and I know I'm not offended. I know they're going to do something that will be useful for them. And also what that leads to is the bumblebee pattern of behavior, where you cross-pollinate conversations and ideas throughout the space, and that could be incredibly useful for us. If you're, I'm not going to reveal what the story is. I so often nearly accidentally reveal it. But let's say it's The Wizard of Oz, because it isn't, so I can talk about that. Let's say that, you know, there are several people doing a tiny show about the Scarecrow in some way, and you've been involved in one of those sessions, but then you go to another session and they're also doing, and you say, oh, there's a show going on down there that's doing this aspect, so maybe if we did this aspect, you know, there's that, all that stuff is really exciting, I think.
Yeah.
And helps to make I've added a creature because typically open space has bumblebees and butterflies who stand and watch and are beautiful, and they just stand and watch. And their purpose is to just be there and be still and to observe what's going on, or just to think, just to have a quiet moment to themselves and just think. So there's bumblebees and there's butterflies, and I've added a spider to this.
Right.
The idea being that there are people who find themselves moving about the space, joining the collective together into a web of story.
Yeah.
That. So it's a really good point. Choice can be crippling, but on the other hand, choice can be very healthy within the collective, in that if you try and do all of those things, you might cross-pollinate ideas around, or you might be a bumblebee or a spider, and I think that's a really useful thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was the name of that artist? David
Wrigley.
How do you spell it?
Shriggley. I can go and get it and show it to you.
Can you? No, don't right now, but I might see if I can find a link online to put underneath the video when we finish.
Okay.
Okay, so talk to me a little bit about, because I know there are, and I'm not sure what kind of experience the performers who are joining us will have had of devising work with a writer in the room, but a lot of the work I make, I facilitate as a writer.
Yeah.
So I guess you're used to, it's unusual to me that people don't work that way, and then I'm here in Denmark now working with some actors who aren't used to working that way, and so that, you know, they've made comments on the process, and that the process is interesting because it's new. Yeah. So talk to me a bit about that and what that's like.
That process, or the amount of opportunity there is to work like that?
Both, but I guess the process itself is interesting because we're going to be in a space where there will be writers directly working with performers, and often people are used to having a director in the middle of that, or a dramaturg in the middle of that, and there will be some directors in the space, but not many.
Okay, so there will be some.
Well, there'll be one facilitator on each floor of the 3 floors that we're working on.
Right.
And I've said that I would like their main job. I've said I don't know what the job is and that they should discover it as they go along. But I think that some of it is dramaturgical in terms of keeping an eye on the big story. I think some of it is observational in terms of them just saying, I'm looking at your process and this is what I'm seeing you do.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I think it's useful to have that reflected back at you.
Yeah.
And some of it is to just be there in case people back away from the risks they've planned to take. And I've said to the facilitators that it's the writer's job and the performer's job to choose the risks that they would like to take, but to have someone there to go, I see that you're taking a risk and that's great.
Yeah.
Can be a really useful thing. But mainly they're not there to be director to all of the tiny shows because there's only 3 of them. So
yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about the process as we've experienced it with me as a writer and you as an actor, or other times that you've done that kind of work.
I mean, thinking back to Hitler's Canary, I think a lot of that was talking about the story, and some of it was being quiet and giving you space to, you know, we'd throw a load of shit out.
Yeah.
And then you'd go, okay, just hang on a minute. Let me just take that in. And I think it's knowing that you don't have to keep throwing shit out. You can just do nothing for a bit and wait for the next thing to do, or to do that thing again, or whatever it is. And I suppose it's as much about listening as it is about doing.
Yeah, that's true, and I often feel really guilty about that. It's hard to not feel guilty about that because there are times when I said this to the actors I'm working with this week who've been amazing, and I said to them, if you see me suddenly just typing on my laptop and I'm not looking at you or talking to you, go and have a coffee.
Yeah,
it's fine. It's just I might just get lost in writing something because something occurs to me, and then that, you know, that's okay.
Yeah. And I suppose, I mean, sort of thinking ahead, so thinking back to Hitler's Canary, but also thinking ahead to tiny shows, perhaps as performers, if we're not necessarily choosing to write particularly, we could be mindful of that as well. And so you might be in a session with somebody who then starts writing, and you might go away and join another session for it, and then come back again. So kind of sort of floating around, seeing what you can offer. I guess, as a performer, or that's how I might do it. Yeah,
I think that's lovely as a choice. Of course there are many different choices, but I think that could be a really lovely thing, is actually to butterfly, to stand by a wall and be a butterfly and just be there and be beautiful and be available for people to look at and go, oh, that's inspiring, that person over there, you know.
I could come and jump in. Do you want me to jump in? I'll jump in and do that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess my other question is, we're not going to have 48 printers in the building.
No.
I'm not even sure if we're going to have one printer, to be honest. So I think there is something in me going, I've written something on this bit of paper, here's a bit of paper, can you read that at me?
Yeah.
But there's also something to be said for being present in a session and assisting with the devising of dialogue.
Yeah.
So that by the time you've experienced that session and that process, you know what that moment is.
Yes.
Without needing.
It's not necessarily sitting down and learning lines. It's kind of if you've created the lines together, then hopefully you'll kind of either remember them or remember the shape.
That, and for me, that's the biggest thing. Is I'm struggling this weekend actually, because we did a great thing yesterday where I was going to write an outline the night before last, a new outline, because of based on the stuff that we had been discussing about different character motivations and plot lines and things. And I was going to write a new outline, and then I couldn't do it, and I realised that I needed to do it with them in the room, to write the outline on them.
Yeah.
So I came in early in the morning and I put up post-it notes of the main moments that I have to, because I'm creating a show that someone else wrote. So I'm having to be anchored in somebody else's choices. So I put up the anchors that we have to keep. And then we together put up some post-it notes of these are the main beats for the characters and the songs that we have to use for the characters. Now we're going to play the whole show through without any acting. We're just going to say the obvious. So I am the villain. I see you. You're a threat to me. So I'm going to threaten you with this thing. Then I do this, and we just played it really straight all the way through. And it was incredibly useful for me to say, oh, stop, there's no motivation there, or there's a hole there, or we don't know what that answer is, do we?
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense, or that feels wrong. So that stuff was really useful. But now I'm sort of slightly stuck, because I said I was going to put down a script this weekend. And I realised that, of course, there are still things I don't know.
Yeah.
So trying to force myself to put a script down is sometimes not that useful.
Yeah.
In many ways, the actual dialogue is the very last thing I do. And by the time I get to it, it's like taking dictation, because I know so well what everybody wants to say that it just comes out.
Yeah.
So I think there's something to be said in tiny shows for trusting that we don't need to put down dialogue unless we specifically want to take a risk in a specific dialogue kind of way.
Yeah.
So like if my risk was I'd like to really try writing some dialogue that has no verbs in it.
Yeah.
That's a thing.
That's a thing to do.
But otherwise, I think to give ourselves maybe the freedom of, and this is where we can be really supported by performers, is for them to go, you don't need to write stuff down. You just give me the shape of what you think it might be.
Yeah. Yeah. That it's a conversation.
Yeah, I think so, and it's a conversation that, as a writer, I used to feel that every word had to come from me.
Yeah.
And I forget, I think, as a writer, that my job is although my job is creation, my job is creation, is assemblage. It's assemblage of things that exist in the world already.
Yeah, it's a jigsaw.
Yeah.
I think it's a jigsaw, or it's colouring in or something.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe it's... I wonder if it's Lego. I wonder if it's, you've got all of these coloured bricks in the world, and there are certain types of characters and certain types of narrative, and we have an understanding of story, and we take all of the bricks and make stuff with, and we make unique things.
Yeah.
But we're using blocks that already exist in the world.
Building blocks that are language and people.
Yeah. Maybe I'll just buy some Lego today and take it into rehearsals.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Instead of Play-Doh, which is what I usually bring in.
Yeah, mix it up.
Yeah. So, okay, what's going to be useful for the performers? What's useful to you guys to have in the space when you arrive? I know that you'll need an explanation of how it's going to work, and we'll start, obviously.
Yeah, you'll probably start with that, and you'll start with, this is how open space works, because not everybody will have done open space.
Yes.
And what is useful?
What will you come in with?
I think I'll come in with trying to be open and responsive. I think that's what I have to be, and up for doing stuff. And once you tell us what the story is,
yes,
then a whole lot of other stuff will come out. I suppose there might be something about, I'm not really thinking about myself so much, but I wonder if people will feel like there's something about etiquette, like casting. As an actor, people get maybe a bit bogged down with who they can be or something.
Yeah.
And maybe wanting to be picked or something rather than picking yourself, or that sort of thing, and maybe sort of throwing that out of the window.
That's really interesting, because we're not going to line the actors up against a wall and say, here, writers, pick your actor.
Pick your actors. Here's a short one, here's a tall one.
Yeah, pick your teams.
Yeah, there won't be so much team picking.
Right, and who do you think looks like Dorothy? You know, who do you think looks like the Scarecrow? But it's really interesting that because we're working in open space, actors can present themselves.
Yeah.
And the writers also need to be open and responsive to that. So if you present yourself as the Tin Man, if you walk past a session where they're writing a song for the Tin Man and you're like, I'll play that.
Yeah.
I'm feeling that moment, then it's up to the writers to go, great, yes, please, yes, and you will play that. And therefore, that's what that does to this character, you know.
Yeah.
And that's a really good risk that we can take for our writing.
Yeah.
Is to go, okay, this is what I said to Emma a long time ago. I can't remember what the part was she said she wanted to play, but she said, oh, I'm a bit sad now because I'm too old to play such and such. It might have been Juliet, I can't remember. Anyway, I said, no, you're not. We just play it with you playing it and see what that does to the story. We just, we do it. We just do it, and we'll just be truthful to it, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And I think that's really much more interesting for me, because ideally I'd like to make work where I just bring you guys into a room. And then I go, look, here's who we are, and here's the stuff that's interesting to us today, so let's make that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I don't know what else is useful. Just, I know that you will have asked people who are the right people to do it anyway. So it's kind of, we're going to walk into the room. I think it'll be a good vibe, and that's all you really need.
I hope so. I'd like to think that some of the people I've asked have come from via Anne-Marie Lewis Thomas's wonderful drama school, the MTA.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I wanted to work with them was because I trust her approach to training and to work processes and work ethics.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited that they're going to join us, but it will be people who've not worked with me before and aren't familiar with these things. So this is really useful for them. But I think as a collective, because we will have such different experiences and we will experience this process in so many different ways, it's really useful to us to remember that we can support each other through the weekend. That if someone is feeling lost in some way, what the great thing is, you can turn to the person next to you and go, ah!
Yeah. Yeah.
We do that, don't we? Do we? I think in Hitler's Canary we had moments where people were like, oh my God, this is driving me nuts.
Do it. Yeah. What are we going to show them?
Yeah, what are we going to show? We had that, didn't we? A lot of that. And we also we've just been having conversations a lot. When are we going to actually do something?
Yeah.
Which is a danger in my work.
Yeah. But actually, I don't know. I think personally I don't mind having to wing it in the show, having not done it. If we've talked about it and decided what it's going to be, then we've decided what it's going to be, and that's part of who I am as a performer. That I'm not too worried about that, and it might well mean that I fall on my arse.
But there's a really interesting thing for me about that, because that's the work I want to make. So I think I don't like rehearsals. I don't really want to rehearse. When I came to Denmark last week, I brought a script with me, a draft.
Yeah.
And we did a reading, and then we did another reading straight afterwards. And the first reading is just because you're sight reading words off a page, and you have no idea what they say. You're just bringing them.
Yeah.
They're just words. And then the second time you read it, you have some hope of connecting with the material in some way.
Yeah.
Not to give a better performance, but just to get it in your brain.
Yeah.
So I believe in that. I believe in exposure. I don't believe in rehearsal, because I think that the more you rehearse something, the more it becomes rehearsed. And I don't want that. I want spontaneity. So I think I'm with you that we could talk and talk and talk about what we're going to do, but never do the show until the opening night. And then when we do the show, that is the doing of the thing.
Yeah. I suppose the only thing that that is difficult with that is the technical side of that. So not so much who says what to who, but like, as I was talking about earlier, the matrix of going, okay, this happens, this happens, this happens. And then I have to know that I have to get from this floor to this floor. And
okay, so
stairs and mapping those routes and things like that.
So should we provide the performers with a map?
Yes.
Literally.
Well, I've never been in this building before, but we definitely need to know how to get around the building.
But also a map, a thing on which you can have in your hand. A notebook.
You can mark up yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that will change because presumably the order of things will change, and nothing will be set necessarily.
So do we give each performer something that isn't a notebook, because that's very linear, but some index cards or something that you can...
There's definitely pen and paper available.
Yeah.
Or people bring pens and paper or whatever.
Yeah.
You need some kind of recording equipment, whether that's a pen or a paper. I prefer pen and paper actually to looking at a screen personally, because I kind of find that it's extremely useful, the technology. It's extremely useful to be able to have it and then it's stored and you don't lose it, or you hopefully don't lose it. But there's it does put up quite a barrier when everything
does, doesn't it? There is something more immediate about a piece of paper and a pen.
It means that you're more in the room. I think if everyone's looking at their devices the whole time, that's quite... I'm not particularly into that.
No.
I find that then you're not doing connection between people.
Yeah.
And a building or whatever it is. You could be anywhere.
I agree. I think that's better. And the more that we can connect up with one another and help one another and work together, the better.
Yeah.
So rather than working with my phone to write down the dialogue that I'm madly writing, I'm going to work with you.
Yeah.
To find the shape of the dialogue and not worry about writing it right now, because after the weekend has gone by, if I want to, I can take that home and write it in my own sweet time.
Well, that feels much more real and much more connected.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. Okay. Our performance...
Also, then you can't really tell who's a writer and who's a performer.
Which I think is lovely.
With people doing a thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is nice. Really nice. Because performers are writers and writers sort of are performers even if they don't.
Yeah.
It's sort of the same thing.
I think so too. Yeah, I really do think that. I think improvisation is writing, and writing is improvisation, and yeah, absolutely.
I've got to move this now because I'm now not kneeling, so I've got to move the screen. Sorry.
So, okay, that's really useful. So the best thing for the performers to try and do is to be open and responsive, and I think that's also true for the writers.
Yeah.
And not that you can't, as a writer, come in with a plan of, I'd like to try this, or I'd like to take a risk with that in some way. Like, if it was me, I'd want to compose something, because I'm not a composer, so that's kind of fun for me to try.
Oh, yeah, and you said, so there are composers there, yes?
Yeah, there are. I mean, the writers, it's 30 writers stroke composers, so...
Oh, right, so they're mostly
They are mostly music people, actually. They're either words and music or just music.
Right, okay.
There's not many that are just words and not...
Are those music people using any kind of musical equipment other than their voice boxes?
Yes, so there will be some keyboards in the building.
Yeah.
Although I'm going to try and limit how many keyboards there are. Because what I don't want is people queuing for a keyboard.
Yeah.
Some of them are bringing ukuleles or handheld.
Right.
That the whole thing is going to be acoustic.
Oh, that's what you meant in your email about if you're bringing...
Are you bringing an instrument? Are you? You're welcome to.
I hadn't thought about bringing an instrument. I could bring an instrument. I'm happy to bring one. I probably won't use it, but I could bring one.
Well, it's up to you. Don't bring it if you don't want to use it. I mean, I think if it's your penny whistle, I'd rather you could speak than play that. Do you know what I mean?
The thing is that most of the things I play are wind instruments, which aren't that useful for speaking or singing.
Yeah.
I'm not so good on the jingies.
Some of the performers I know are bringing ukuleles. Some of the writers I know are bringing ukuleles. So that's always a nice thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think there'll be plenty of instruments in the room, and I'm not really fussed.
No.
If somebody wants to take some risks and do some harmony, that's great. We can have a cappella stuff. I'm not fussed how much singing happens, to be honest. If everybody just does dialogue, I think that's fine. There's nothing that says this has to have song in it.
Yeah.
I think it will have whatever people want to put in it, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Good. So is there anything else? Are there any other burning questions that you have about the weekend?
Will there be a kettle?
So-and-so Arts are providing us with a nice cafe so that people can have tea.
Oh, brilliant. Okay.
Sandwiches, I think, and things like that.
Yeah. So there's a cafe there.
Yes, and there's also a Browns over the road. There's a restaurant.
Right. Okay. So there's food and drink available.
Yes.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. And I guess, is it useful to tell people, please wear something comfortable? People know that, right? Please.
Sorry. Oh, bloody hell. It's a moth. It's a moth. They've got to die. What was the question? Sorry.
The question was, how do you feel about moth preservation in... the question was clothing. Is it... We don't want to do any costumey things, do we?
Probably not costumey things. I think what you want to say is, I don't know what this building is. So, like, is it a building which, you know, maybe just don't wear your favourite clothes that might get dusty, because most buildings are dusty. I don't know. Just bring something, you know. Maybe it's just obvious.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay. I was speaking to Emma, who's coming along, and she wanted to know if she should/could bring her tap shoes. And I said, if you want to bring your tap shoes, bring your tap shoes.
Yeah, she totally should bring her tap shoes.
Exactly.
She has that urge. That's brilliant.
She said, you know, because like maybe if I'm not doing something, I could, you know, just work on my tap for a bit. Or she could do it in it, you know, who knows?
That. Well, if she's got tap shoes there, one of the writers might go, oh, I'd like to choreograph.
I met her because she was teaching a tap dancing class for everyone from the age of 5 to 99 all together.
She totally needs to teach me how to tap again, because that would be amazing.
Fantastic. Really funny.
That's very good. She should definitely do that. And also people should feel free to bring knitting. That's just a rule in my room.
Yeah.
There should be knitting going on.
Yeah.
Okay, so that seems really useful and fairly straightforward.
Yeah.
Should performers worry about not remembering lines?
No.
Should they worry about getting something wrong that they've been taught by a writer?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I think it's really good to say these things, though. If I teach you a song that I've carefully composed on my own in a corner for an hour,
you won't be able to remember it.
And then when you perform it, you can't remember how it goes. I don't think that matters.
Okay, here's a good question. What is better to remember? If you can't remember the song, is it better to remember the words or the tune?
Whichever stands out more for you.
Because for me, I always remember the tune more than the words.
Fine. Then just give it large with the tune and, you know, don't do any words for a while or make up your own words. I think that's fine. I think it's really good for us to remember that the performances are not about performing, that they are about us looking at what we've made and learning from it, because we need to step back from it. So one of the reasons why we have a sort of a dress rehearsal is so that we can really figure out the logistics of what we want to do. Yeah. And then we have 2 performances of it. One so that we can go, oh my God, we did it. Oh my God, I'm so nervous. Yeah. With just our family and friends there. And then one where we can actually have a look at it.
Yeah.
And see what we've done. And that is the only reason that we're having a presentation to the public, is so that we can say, you know, oh look, I made a thing. Oh, that's what it looks like. And oh, that's what it looks like through the eyes of an audience. Isn't that interesting?
And should children come to the performances?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
Okay.
You know me, I welcome kids into the space, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we shouldn't worry about messing it up. We shouldn't worry that we're going to offend the writers. We shouldn't worry that.
So this is the question, which is, we're doing this weekend.
Yeah.
And is that enough in itself? It's an exploration of how this thing works, and then we'll know what we want to happen next, if anything, after that. Or is there some bigger question that you're trying to answer, or what are you trying to do in longer term beyond that weekend?
Are you asking me what do you think you're doing?
Who do you think you are?
It's a really good question. After this event, we are going to, as part of, because we got Arts Council funding for this, and as part of our Arts Council funding application, we put in that we wanted to have an evaluation meeting.
Yeah.
So that, and on the Sunday after the last performance, we will all have an hour of feeding back immediately.
Yeah.
So we'll do some straight away evaluation, and then we'll come together a few days later or whenever we can, and we'll do a proper evaluation gathering where we have pizza and talk.
Yeah.
I think the pizza is very important.
Yeah, sounds good.
So that's the immediate plan for this one. Because this is the first iteration of Tiny Shows, part of this is finding out how it works. So I will stress to people that it might not work. This whole thing might be a nightmare. We might get to it where we're like, we don't have anything to show, we didn't manage to write anything in our 10-minute sessions, we all panicked, it was all hideous, you know. And that's fine. That's
Arts Council money ever again, please.
Yeah, yeah. And that's just as valid a response. You know, the Arts Council fund things not to succeed, but to explore.
Yeah.
And obviously they hope for success, and they would like you to plan for success.
Yeah.
But part of your success should definitely be, we found out the things that don't work.
Yeah. But Tiny Shows might be a thing.
Tiny Shows is a thing.
Tiny Shows is a thing. Okay.
Yeah. It's not a big thing, it's a small thing. My purpose for doing Tiny Shows was, I find it very frustrating that a lot of new musical development around the world takes the form of competitive opportunities. Yeah. So if you've got 250 writers, I don't know how many members of MMD there are, but say there's 250 members of MMD, and then there's a competitive opportunity, and it's advertised to their members, and lots of people do competitive opportunities, and MMD very brilliantly lets everybody know about them, and then 249 of those people get rejected, and one person wins.
Yeah.
And I think we have to look at the whole ecological system of what it is we're doing.
Yeah.
And what that does to us as a collective, as a community of artists, that most of us, that we are all more used to rejection.
Yeah.
What that does to us as artists, what it says as a culture, in the same way that, you know, what does it say to women that when one woman gets put down, what does it say to other women, you know? Yeah. So I think it's the same thing, and I know that, you know, it's perhaps not as urgent for the world that musical theatre writers can have a boost to their confidence, but it's slightly urgent to me.
You know, you're in the milieu that you're in, and if you can't make a difference to the thing that you're in,
yeah,
make a difference to the thing you're in. I think it's a really good idea. You know, if I was talking to Dorian about tiny jazz shows or whatever it was, you know what I mean? If I was talking to him, he would be saying the same thing, that a lot of these things are competition led, and it's about one person winning the competition and everybody else can fuck off, quite frankly. Yeah. And it doesn't actually help develop the work.
No. It doesn't do it.
Like Virginia Woolf says in A Room of One's Own as well, about how you kind of, she talks about, have you read it?
No.
It's brilliant. It's really good. She talks about how, you know, okay, so we don't have a female Shakespeare, and we don't have a female, I don't know, Dickens or whatever. Or she was sort of saying, but what you have to have for women to succeed is you have to have lots of women competing and not competing, but doing it.
Doing it. Yeah.
Doing it. You can't just wait for the one person.
No.
Everybody's got to do it, and you've kind of got to have the failures as well. And I don't want to use the word failure, but you know, you've got to make some mistakes.
Yeah, and the whole thing about embracing that making of mistakes is what Tiny Shows is all about. So Tiny Shows, I designed Tiny Shows in response to Finn Kennedy's In Battalions project, where he asked people in the creative industries to propose ways in which risk-taking in new work could be supported. Specifically in theatre writing, but you know, anywhere, in filmmaking, everywhere in the creative industries, we need to support risk-taking. So this is designed specifically to try and say yes to everybody, and we have said yes. I've said yes to every writer and composer who came and asked to join in. So far, I've said yes to every performer who's asked to join in. And that, being able to say yes, and not only that, but being able to say, yes, you can come and play, and I will pay you. I will pay you tiny money. It's above equity minimum that we're paying. You know, it's not below minimum wage. It's proper money.
Yeah.
And I'm paying everyone who is taking part in the weekend.
Yeah.
And as best I can, I'm paying people who are taking part in the prep for it as well, because it's then it becomes a proper, you're a writer, you're writing, you're contributing some writing to this event. It would not happen without your writing, and therefore I'm paying you. You're a performer. It would not happen without your contribution to it, and therefore I'm paying you for your work. And that to me is really important. So we all get excited, and also we all talk about these provocations beforehand, and we can all talk about what's going on and get excited about what's going to happen and think about how it might work for us and meet new people, and it starts to build and strengthen ties within the community that I think are really exciting, not just between writers so we can support each other, but between writers and performers, and the great relationship I have with you guys and my tribe, you know, that it doesn't feel like there's a separation between us. It feels like we all work together to make work, and it doesn't matter whose work it is. We'll all service that person at that time for whatever they need.
Yeah.
That stuff is really exciting to me. So I feel like tiny shows, I would like it to end up being some kind of a format that is flexible enough that it can be used for tiny movies or tiny, you know, tiny games, any kind of those things.
Tiny jazz.
Yeah, tiny jazz. I think that's a lovely idea, and I would love to do that, because I think then we could just say yes to everyone who, I mean, jazz composers must have a really difficult time in this country.
Yeah, they do.
And I think it would be lovely to do tiny jazz songs or tiny, you know, tiny jazz scores. Why not?
Yeah.
Let's find some tiny movie makers and give them tiny jazz scores for their movies. I mean, you know, why not?
That's a lovely idea. Let's do that next.
Great. Okay. Great. And I think as long as we can, I mean, the funding that I got from the Arts Council for this was less than £15,000. It's the smallest amount of funding that you can apply for. Yeah. And you get an answer in 6 weeks. And I just went, it's this much money. These are the maximum people I can help. And collaborating with So-and-So Arts has been really great, because the building they're in at the moment is a really wonderful space. So we've just said it's this many people because that's how many we can fit in the building.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'd like to do it bigger sometime when we know more about how the form works. Yeah. But also, what's really interesting about this is I've been saying for years that I know that a lot of people in the movie world make short films because it's a small commitment that they can do for a little bit of money, and they can learn about their process. Yeah. And there really isn't an equivalent in theatre. Yeah. And I've been saying for a long time, I think that tiny shows could happen in the foyer before a show, could happen on front cloth, the way they have trailers before a big movie. Yeah. You know, there's no reason why at a gig you can't just have a tiny moment where someone else comes out and introduces their work to the audience. Yeah. I feel like we don't take advantage of any of those things.
Idea. Yeah.
So I think that the small format, which I did not invent, it is so underused, and we could be doing more with it. But the specific tiny shows as a format is specifically designed to A, take risks, help people take risks, which is why there's provocations as a part of it, and B, it's designed to form strong collective ties. So I'm not saying to 30 writers and 30 performers, come into a building and don't speak to each other for the weekend. No, I'm saying let's build a
yeah, and that's part of the thing is building that. Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah.
Either brilliant or insane, and it's just not going to work.
No, it's going to be really fun. It's going to be fun. Let's have a fun.
I love you. Thank you for everything that you do and being amazing and being part of my tribe.
Thank you. I think it's going to be really fun. Really looking forward to seeing you.
Likewise. I haven't seen you for yonks. Okay, so now we should just catch up on our personal lives, which we don't need to broadcast to you.
No, we don't need to broadcast that.
So just stay on the line, and I'm going to stop the broadcast and say thank you so much, Sophie Trott. I will put a link to where people can find out more about you online on YouTube.
Okay.
Stay right there.